Whenever I come to Walton, I always remember the beach hut and my grandmother. She was a Victorian lady. She was very old. She lived to just before her 101st birthday. And she told me the first limerick I ever heard, which started another interest of mine into the history of limericks. And it was a winkle who winked at Torquay went out for a stroll by the sea. He trod on the tail of a very large whale, and the whale had the winkle for tea.
I suppose my memories go back to the 1950s when I was, I suppose, 6 or 7 years old in short trousers and a school cap. And walking down the pier with Mum and Dad, it would have been an interesting experience because Mum and Dad's always got longer legs than you, so you walk twice as far as Mum and Dad do because, and the treat was, you come to Southend and the deal was you'd walk down the pier but you get a train back, which was my earliest memory. And one of the earliest memories I have of the pier is losing my school cap. And school caps, I think, were quite expensive, and it was a windy day. That's the earliest memory I've got of actually walking down the pier. And down the end of the pier, it was full of fabulous entertainment. There were arcades, various rides, all sorts of museum, theatre, packed full of entertainment. But not only that, you have the boats, and I always think of Southend Pier, you think of boats. The pier is about boats. Boats need the pier, pier needs boats. So it's not just about a structure, it's a functional structure. It was built so people could get on and off boats at high tide and low tide, and that's why it was built. So the pier is essentially a structure for boats, and that's the most important aspect of it. And sometimes we do lose sight of that it is a functional building, not just to look at and look pretty. It needs to be used. It's the first time I've done this in reverse, going from London, Tower Pier to Southend Pier. I've done it the other way around, that's Southend to Tower Pier. That was about 1962 on the Royal Sovereign. The dock area is a completely different animal to what it is today. When I travelled in 62, although it was the tail end of the Docklands, as we might remember it, a thriving port community. It's now completely changed. Going back to my memories of travelling on this river, this was the major route, London to the east coast, the holiday resorts. These boats, paddle steamers, would have been packed, absolutely heaving, absolutely massively full of people. Health and safety didn't come into it. It would have been chock-a-block, because this was the way to travel from London to the east coast. As a child, this was probably the favourite time of a trip on a paddle steamer because everything was happening in the engine room. So rather than be out on deck, I'd be downstairs looking at what's going on in the engine room because the paddle wheels are being made to go forward, then made back, slow, stop. But that was the place to be. The smells, the sounds, the vibrations. So as a child, you'd be up and down the stairs, seeing what's going on because there was so much to see, so much activity, people having fun, having a few beers, just thoroughly out to have pleasure and enjoy themselves. And especially on a sunny day, as today, it was just great fun to be on board a paddle steamer.
As you are probably aware, Southend Pier is the longest pleasure pier in the world, just 1.25 miles long. And there's a train which runs along the pier. So when you're at Southend, you must make sure that you allow plenty of time to getting back to the ship, at least 40 minutes from the pier entrance to the ship.
When the railway was going to come into Southend, now the railway followed the pier. The first point of transport into Southend would have been the pier. That was the way people would travel, come down by boat. And when they wanted to bring the railway into Southend, the idea was to join up the pier to the railway. But there were various influential people living in Royal Terrace, and they objected to actually having a railway coming down in front of them to the pier. And as you have to pass an Act of Parliament to build a railway, they actually put a clause into it that no engine would let off steam within I think it said half a mile of the actual Royal Terrace. So that's why you suddenly find the railway comes inland from Lee. It starts to drift in and ends up halfway down Southend High Street. But the original intention was to bring the railway to join up to the pier, which actually would have been absolutely perfect. But there we are, some influential people living in Royal Terrace objected, and they got their wish.
Well, I was on Southend seafront somewhere, and I saw this ad for pier crew, and as part of the description they said you would be taught how to drive a pier train. Even if there weren't many people around, if you were driving the train, at least you were doing something. And particularly if you're coming back at night, the lights along the seafront were always very impressive. The Golden Mile lights and all the other lights along the seafront. So I used to enjoy that. I remember I drove the last train back that night. I think it must have been about 8 o'clock. Just as the pier was closing, there's one final train obviously to bring everybody back. And it was 8 o'clock, I'm pretty sure, because the fire started I think somewhere between 9 and 10. Nobody found out what caused it. But tragically, it gutted the railway station for a start. That went up in a cloud of smoke. It was still burning the next morning. It took them ages to put it out entirely. And there's the big bits of steel, like the rails for the train, for example, were just warped. They got so hot, they just warped. Incredible amount of heat down there. But yeah, very, very sad day.
The pier, well, it hasn't always been like that. At one time we had horse and carts down there. And there was no pier like it was now. That was just muddy and awful. And then along the seafront, just in front of the pier, we used to have coaches, Kohinoor coaches, and they used to take people on little trips for a shilling.
And we used to have at least 2 coach outings a year, and it was always to Clacton, one in the summer and one in the early autumn. And we used to come down here, and the coaches in those days, they used to discharge the passengers dead opposite the pier where the traffic lights are now, so you could get straight out the coach and come down onto the pier and onto the beach. And that's exactly what we did, and we dropped down the other side of the sea walls, just about where we're sitting now, and there we would stay virtually all day. Surprising what memories come back to you, isn't it, when you start talking,
Yes, but I do like seeing a pier. It's part of our old English heritage, isn't it, to have a pier at the seaside, yes.
When I was 15, which is way back in 1965 and 1966, I used to work on Walton Pier 6 days a week during the summer holidays when I was still at school. The way we used to live was great fun. My mate and I used to sleep in a beach hut. We'd cycle from the beach hut to the pier every morning, but before we started, our breakfast every day would be a chocolate marshmallow and a donut. Very healthy. For lunch in the pier restaurant, we'd have pie and chips. So this is every day for 6 days a week, pie and chips. And then afterwards, because of course we were only 15 or 16, we would go into the pier hotel directly opposite and have obviously nothing more than a shandy. And then cycle back a little bit more wobbly back to the beach hut. And that was our existence. But hey, I don't look so bad on it now, do I? One of the rides that the lads used to love working was the waltzer. For the same reason that people wanted to work the big wheel and dodgems, because it attracted the girls. I didn't like working the waltzer, quite simply because the idea was obviously you'd stand behind the ride, you'd whip the car around and get the screams from the girls. The problem with that is, if you had a group of 3 or 4 girls, at least twice an hour, someone would be sick. And who had to clear it up? Whoever spun the wheel. So no, I'm sorry, you know, it's all very well attracting the girls and sort of getting some laughs, but no, I drew the line at the Walser.
Here comes the Luftwaffe. In dozens of flights, hundreds of planes, bombers, fighters, dive bombers, across that 21 miles of channel, that 8 short minutes of water. Their first tactics were to bomb convoys in the channel.
Suddenly, all hell let loose. There was all these bombers coming in all over the place.
Yeah.
Spitfires suddenly descended as hear this rattling of machine guns all over, and there's bullets and shrapnel falling down across. We just died the hedge. But when the Germans came so low, I'm not joking, low in the level of these windows, under the telephone wires to get away from Spitfires, and there's all you could see was this bloke with a black helmet, big black goggles, and he's looking at the kids going as he went by, and it was only about 12 foot away. I mean, all there along barbed wire, wasn't it?
Oh yes, and they dropped bombs down by the pier, didn't they?
And they're all barbed wire.
And I worked in the next road, Alexander Street, a big food shop it was, and we had all rations if we were invaded. All down in the cellars was all food, and we were supposed to stay there and feed the Germans. Anyway, it was, well, I was in there one day and they decided they'd bomb the High Street, and they bombed R.A. Jones, the big jewellers that was in the High Street, and further down, and then I'm standing holding a £60 cheese and they're saying, drop it. And I couldn't. I couldn't
Can't
drop
waste
it.
food.
I was just glued to it, you know. It was weird.
Whenever we had anybody new start on the pier, we'd always set up some little initiation ceremony. Sometimes they'd get a little electric shock if they were working on one of the rides. But one of our favourites was to start telling them the story about Green Gilbert. And the story used to go that in World War II there was a fighter pilot who ditched his plane just off the pier and his body was never recovered. And whether that's true or not, I don't know. But that was the story we used to spin. Underneath the pier, in the concrete pillars, it's really dark, eerie. When the wind blows from a particular direction, you can get all sorts of weird harmonics, and it really is a very creepy place to be. And so, having set the scene for the story of Green Gilbert, we would get the new recruit underneath the pier on some pretext or other, probably to have your lunchtime pie and chips, and we go down under there. And all of a sudden, this weird wailing noise would start up. And of course, it'd be one of us behind one of the pillars. But anyway, we would build this, and then this horrible apparition would just come out from behind one of the pillars and behind the new guy, completely draped head to foot in seaweed. So you can imagine what it looked like and smelt like, and would just lean over him and put both arms around him from behind. And that was a good test to see whether that guy would actually stand the pace and stay with us for longer than a week.
It was a lovely sunny morning, actually, really weird, as it was brilliant sunshine. And I turned up for work, as I was a photographer in the town, as normal. And somebody came into the shop and said, the sea's frozen. So myself and my colleague, we grabbed cameras, 35mm cameras, and rushed off out to find that all of the coast all the way along was completely frozen. But the weird thing was that it was totally quiet. There weren't many people about, of course. It was because the sea normally, if you live here, the sea constantly makes a noise. Even if it's a calm day, there's always the rolling of the water. And because it was frozen, there was absolutely stillness. It wasn't like a frozen pond, because the sea was a moving item as it froze. That it was sort of ripples of frozen, almost looked like snow rather than ice. as you went further out, there were ice floes all around the lifeboat, which was frozen in. But no, nobody would have been stupid enough to try and stand on it.